And I realized that the number I was making, minus expenses, minus whatever, was probably 10 times more than an average individual who's in a 9 to 5. But I was hoarding it. There was one day where I had to go to the doctor because of the amount of stress that I had. I didn't know what it was, but I got in the car and I drove. And the doctor just went, "This is what stress is." And I was like, at the time I was 28, I would get to the point where I would pee in bottles in between calls because I didn't have time to go to the bathroom. Yeah. And if we can get vulnerable, I will just share the truth because
Welcome to the new era of the Christel Crawford Show. Everything's changed. And so I'm so excited for you to hear this conversation between me, my business coach, Jacob Peggs. Jacob is one of the kindest, gentlest, most generous, well spoken people I know. Jacob in this conversation exposes the inner journey behind the success because none of us get to where we're going without doing the inner work. Well, Jacob, I am so honored that you're here to talk with me. So thank you for that.
you're welcome.
Yeah. How would you talk to somebody about what it is that you do?
I've been asked this question from different angles, and I always sort of crack a joke. I'm like, I help people print magic internet money on the internet using words. But I think it's much deeper than that because, the sales side and the marketing is one thing. But I always get the comments when people do work with me for a while. It's like, you've helped me find purpose. You've helped me align my energy. You've helped me sort of reprogram everything. And these are things that come further down the line, but I would say at the surface, I'm a business consultant. I'm good at simplifying processes and helping people sort of find freedom through building one person businesses.
What I'd like to do today is kind of go into the story behind the story, because you and I have had enough conversations now to know that both of us have done the work to get us here in business. And of course, it's different for each one of us. So, knowing that you're succeeding today in a way that you haven't before in multiple ways, you had to go through a lot to get here. What do we need to know about you to give us context for who you are and where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you sort of a TLDR and you can pick where we want to dive into because the story is kind of crazy in many different ways. I was raised with a single mother and two sisters, fortunate to go to private school, and then all shit hit the fan and the finances went down. So we had to find our way. So I was a musician at heart and played guitar for 15 years, went to California to study jazz with a scholarship. I was the classic party animal who used to do anything and everything to bring in a few extra bucks while having fun. And that was sort of the creator in me in its full force, early 20s, getting lost, figuring things out. And during my stay there, obviously I had an awakening moment, I think, early on. And I was like, music is something I want to play, but I don't want to treat it as a business. And even though I was young, I was really grateful I had that calling. So I switched my degree and sort of stumbled into software engineering through discovering blockchain and all of that. But post California, I went to London and spent a good 10 years there climbing the corporate ladder. I was a salesman in insurance, selling the most dreadful thing in the world for a while, picked up some skills, and then joined various startups and agencies and became a web developer up until the point where I decided to do my own thing. There was always a spark that was entrepreneurial, sort of like, you can't be an employee. It was too much. And then just before COVID, I founded my web design business. I was a freelancer, scaled that through to 12 people at its peak. We were turning around about $1 million a year in revenue, but I was really unhappy, even though the successful parts were great and the initial kick of survival was there. Over the years, I sort of got misaligned with that whole thing. I knew I was a creative at heart and wanted to explore the roots and go back to creating through writing this time. And, I know software engineering means you stack little bits and pieces together, but I was always good with words. Maybe it was the lyricist from back in the day or whatever that was, and founded Modern Maker, my business consultancy, after tearing everything to the ground, after doing a lot of work on myself, staring at those big numbers that weren't fulfilling, and had the courage and the reality distortion in me, or the conviction that I believed I could do this again from zero, but this time being free. This time, not being governed by the calendar, the matrix, the traditional systems, and finding a way that fulfilled me, that enabled me to sort of teach others. And then somewhat 250 students later and 2,000 customers, we print magic internet money on the internet, and here we are today.
Yes,
So
we do. But I want to go back a little bit, if you would. So
yeah.
it is interesting telling our life story because there's so much. And I would imagine there were multiple moments where there was this like, oh shit moment or something's got to change. But there was one in particular I'm curious about, which is when you had the agency and you were making bank and you just, what was the tipping point? Was there a moment or a pivotal thing that happened that like tipped the scales?
Yeah, and if we can get vulnerable, I will just share the truth, because obviously, coming from a place with a single mother where money was always an issue, we never had it growing up to the extent that other people did. I think there was a deeply rooted fear in me that I felt that anything I did was never enough. There was never a stop sign telling me that this is enough. And I would just compound my diary with call after call after call. And at the beginning, it was like this euphoric sensation of, I'm making so much money. Fuck yeah, this is amazing. But when you try to run a marathon and you haven't prepared for it, and all you're doing is sprinting like a truck driver without any handbrakes, taking with you anything and everything, it got to a point where I couldn't endure through the calls. I couldn't endure through the life that I had built for myself. I was strapped in a chair, aging. My heart wanted to swim in an ocean and just jump in the sea, but I had another client call. And what really did it for me, my granddad passed away, who was really warm to my heart in 2020. And I was fortunate enough to hold his hand and have that moment with him, but I almost didn't because of a client call. And when I went there, I knew that was the last time. And he was also an entrepreneur. And I remember driving back knowing that was the last time, but I forgave myself in that moment because I got there. If I was one day late, I wouldn't have seen him. And I don't know what today would have been like. But I looked back and I was like, I would get to the point where I would pee in bottles in between calls because I didn't have time to go to the bathroom.
Mm.
I would run to the cupboard and have, 5 or 6 almonds and just chug them down and put a smile on my face and pretend that everything was okay. But deep down, I knew that something had to break. It was beyond money. Like, I would look at the bank account and you're taking home 50K. We've had apps that were 300K, in the software world, that's how the money goes. And I was dreading opening my eyes every morning. It would sting so much. And I was like, no, like, you're numb to this. You can do this, make more, do more. But it got to the point where I was like, we're aging here. Your granddad's gone. Many people are also going to start going. How many memories are you missing out on because you're locked in this 4x4 wall? Like, how much determination did this take? When are you going to reap the rewards and eat the fruit from the seeds that you planted? Because the next step, like, there was one day where I had to go to the doctor because of the amount of stress that I had. I didn't know what it was, but I got in the car and I drove. And the doctor just went, "This is what stress is." And I was like, at the time I was 28. And I'm like, this is not a healthy 28-year-old. And this isn't the life you want to be. So I started sort of thinking, how can I break the cycle? It was the first ever thought I had of, I need to change this thing. But then you go through this battle of, what? I'm going to cancel clients? No. Maybe another day. But the other day turned into a week, into a month, into fighting for that number that you saw on the spreadsheet, where number has the word numb in it. I think we spoke about this before.
Yeah.
I was so numb to the number that I forgot to live. But it was these little signals where I think I asked myself, what is enough? Define what enough is. And because I was so logically minded at the time, I had forgotten the creative, the musician, that little boy that wanted to sort of create. I had to justify in logic what enough was. And I realized that the number I was making, minus expenses, minus whatever, was probably 10 times more than an average individual who's in a 9-to-5. But I was hoarding it. I wasn't spending it. I was just staring at it. It was a number in a box. And all of these thoughts started haunting me, where I sort of had an inner calling where I was like, are you acting from a wounded boy who didn't have, instead of embracing the man you're becoming, because of that childhood trauma, because of the way that you were brought up, because of circumstance, and every time I'm talking like transactions for Spotify that are $7. And the little wound would crawl up and be like, oh my God, it's $7 out of your account. It's now, $358,097. Oh my God, no. And I had to work with that, because that's not okay, right? That is realizing or having, and I'm grateful for the awareness to know that behavior is wrong. And at the time I had no idea. I was like, you're fearing $7. And obviously I've probably just exaggerated it, but it could be paying a salary, or
Yeah.
looking at 4 transactions and having that going, that's a 7-year-old in you that had a wound. Whereas the 28, 29, 30-year-old in you is telling yourself, go do push-ups, go run, go exert energy. 7-year-old doesn't want to do push-ups. The 7-year-old needs a hug from an older brother and needs to be told it's okay. And when I started realizing, like, I know this sounds a bit touche, but I found a picture of the 7-year-old boy and I had him on my phone, and I would tell him it's okay. And that's what I needed to hear, because the 30-year-old at the time was speaking from a place of being 7. And that kid needed to know it was okay. And going through that cycle on my own got me to reach out for help, got me to overcome, because I wanted to. And that was sort of the beginning of whatever you want to call it, the cleansing, the healing, the shift from the little boy to the man, and embracing that comes with another set of responsibilities. And realizing that, whether you had a 10th of the money in the bank or a 20th of the money in the bank, you still had runway the same way you exited your 9-to-5 to do this again. And that was sort of the foundation of me, I guess, taking that first leap and scaling down and being okay.
When you first started realizing that, there's different parts of you, for example, 30-year-old me, little me, was that an awareness that you had on your own, or had you like, how did that begin?
That started when I knew something was up because as a child I was avoidant because of circumstance. I would thrive by myself, and I was the king of avoiding, the king of independence. When you grow up and you avoid, that sort of bleeds into your family life. You think you're present, but everybody around you knows you're not there. So my wife actually said you should go get some help because this is something we're noticing. And I was like, thank you. I'm now open to that. And I did go to therapy, and I sort of asked the lady, bless her, like, I don't know what's wrong with me, but I know there's something wrong. I don't know if it's you that's going to help me, but I'm taking that first leap. And she went and asked me the golden question, which was, what is enough? Do you
Mm.
know how much enough is? And we dug down into why I couldn't define it, obviously supporting family, supporting things that I had, or, I needed whatever number. And we defined it. And it's like, well, you're making more than that. Even minus all this giving that you do for family purposes. And, you know, you're making more. You're somebody that could probably live on a bunch of fruit and $500 a month, gauging by the lifestyle that you've just defined and the person that you are.
Yeah.
And she sort of made aware where the wounds were coming from just by channeling and mirroring the circumstances that justified the thoughts that I previously couldn't label, the Spotify transaction or the salary payment going out, the fire that was sparking, which to me was maybe anxiety or whatever that was. She sort of placed the label and said, let's dive into that wound. And by giving me awareness, it changed everything because I now knew that I was talking to a boy instead of a man because I'm not like, I can't say a stingy individual. I'm very giving, and I was, and I saved a lot of my family from various circumstances. So I'm like, if it's, I would perceive it as stingy. It's like, this isn't stinginess. This is a wounded boy telling you he's scared is going to run out. And you need to give that bit attention. I don't know if I've answered your question
Totally. So we're
somehow.
doing ADD style today
Yeah.
because that's everybody listening is the same. You did answer. You know, it took me, well, took me a long time to get here. It took me the last 10 years of really working deeply with consciousness, and I do this work now called functional consciousness that ends up regulating nervous systems and setting people free with awareness. What I love about what you said was that she asked me the questions that gave me the awareness. And from the
Yes.
awareness, you were able to then look around and choose.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you did, but I wonder if there's more to it than that. Like, how did you, was it just going to therapy and the subsequent awareness that then worked its way into your life? Was there more that you did with yourself to change your functionality inside?
Yeah, I think you raise a really valid point with that awareness because I mean, there's no right or wrong. I think just drawing from my experience, people can go to therapy for years. I was somebody who did it 5 times and then it gave me what I needed. And I invested in some sort of a performance coach that pointed me in the right direction there. But that awareness sort of took me down a rabbit hole of, you are master moneymaker here. So money making isn't a problem. If you want to justify the logic, can you do this with a bit of reality distortion?
Mm.
Like, do you need 100 clients to make that sum of money? Can you find one? That means your calendar has 1 hour a week instead of 80-hour weeks. Do you have the belief in you that that's okay? So I had to do a lot of logical justification at first to break free. But I was somebody naturally sort of raised as an athlete. I used to run a lot and do sports. I had to challenge myself with that competitive nature of, instead of more, I reversed it into less. One less call. One more automation to get you to work out in the middle of the day.
Less is the new more.
Less is the new more. And I reverse challenged my logical brain to slow down and used my experience to get there. It helped initially, but then when I had free time, I would go into hustle mode again and fill it up. So I think for me, it was a lot more of a spiritual awareness that I had to undergo. And what worked for me was finding alignment and telling myself, writing is alignment for you. Playing music again is alignment for you. Not taking sales calls at all, which was the best challenge that I've now been pursuing for the last 3 years, was the epitome of it, where I realize now slowing down didn't mean less money. In fact, it brought on so much more than I could ever believe it would, because I found alignment. And every time, go on.
No, I was just curious about the alignment piece. Like, how did that enter the conversation?
So to me, when I mentioned before, like with the Zoom calls, I knew in me, this is not what I want to do. Like the same way when someone's going through maybe a divorce or something traumatic, your body's going to slouch, your facial expression will slouch. The signals are all there, yet maybe I'm going to go one more time. Maybe I'm going to do this thing. So my body was telling me, you don't like calls. It was as simple as that.
Terrible.
Didn't matter who it is and what's coming in, you don't want it. So I was like, what is aligned? Like, honestly, what can you do? If you wrote the words and sent someone a Loom video, that's a hybrid call, isn't it? Or if you gave somebody a text with an offer in it, a Google Doc with an offer in it, isn't that what it is? And then I got a yes. And I was like, oh my God, that was the alignment piece was, I'm using words now to find something. But deeper than that, it was, the soul wants to, I live on an island. I lived by the beach. I was raised by the beach. I wanted to swim. And it was like, are you really serious here? You're saying you just want to swim? And I went swimming.
Yes.
And I fed the soul. So I showed up so much better. And I went swimming again, and I went running again, and I went, did whatever my heart desired. I wrote music again, and I made more money in return. And I'm like, wait, hold on a minute. You're happy. You're actually happy. You're showing up, and this feels good. And I started writing down consciously what didn't align with me. I hate sending invoices. Hire a fucking accountant, let the guy do it for you. Beautiful. That was out the way. Okay, what else feels aligned? And then slowly challenging myself into finding those pieces sort of helped me overcome and burn down to the ground everything that wasn't aligned, to the point where I was not writing code anymore at the agency. I stopped writing code. I hired people to write code for me. And then the cycle sort of went on, and accepting, I don't want this. I'm going to get rid of it, or I'm going to delegate it, and come to where we are today.
Yeah. I For me, so I never learned about the word alignment was a new word for me. I know that wasn't in my vocabulary. I was raised Christian and religious, and then I had to get out of that. And so that whole universe of woo was, well, I wasn't really exposed to it while being deeply in it. So anyway, so I learned about in with my consciousness work, what's light for you is true for you and what's heavy is not true for you. But I still managed to get myself into a really perilous position in my business because I was still kind of connected to, well, I have to do things, and have to and heavy. I was like, have to's in another world of its own. Heavy, you just have to do it. Just struggle through. Where did the conversation of alignment enter your world? Was that a person you had? Was it books you read? Like, how did you get a hold of this thing that you ended up using to transform your entire life?
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, I think growing up, I listened to a lot of Alan Watts, and
Okay.
Alan Watts keeps you grounded. He's like the Eastern guru from the West, if you like. So I felt that when I would listen to some of his work, or sort of find anyone online talking a little bit more to the heart and the soul, there was like this burning sensation going, "Ooh, you resonate with this. You want to go down this rabbit hole." And I would end up watching videos and things, and then I would ask myself, why did that happen? Why did the last hour of this binge happen? Is there some sort of calling in you? And never thought much of it. But then I started bookmarking things and coming back and writing about it, or like exploring more of like the spiritual side, and realizing that I'm now consuming something that's not business related. It's not Hormozy's $100 million offer book, and I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that sort of made me reflect and understand that there's more to it, because you forget, you become numb to life because you're so caught up in business.
Yeah.
And every time I did something non-business related, it was like, oh my God, the heart, the soul, spirit, this, that, it's coming together.
I can breathe over here. Weird. I
Yeah.
forgot that I could breathe. It's like
Yeah. So I think that's what sort of put me there. But then when I realized it was alignment, I did some self study on what that meant just online, and found that, okay, this is how it should be. And all of a sudden realized you were out of alignment this whole time.
did it become like a creative challenge to create a life that was in alignment, or was it coming from a different space? Because I see you approaching it like a creative challenge. Like, I've got these creative constraints of not this, not this, not this, this,
Yeah.
and this. What can we do? Was it that, or was it something else?
Yeah. I mean, it was a little quotes that I sort of told myself, which was, you built a business you want to run away from. You now want to build a business you want to run towards. And a business not built by design is a business built by default. And the word design was the challenge. So I started saying, instead of you crossing boundaries, start creating constraints. Instead of, you know, me having to cross these things, lead with a white calendar and block things around the white space. Whereas before you were looking for white space amidst the blue calls, and that felt good. And setting a constraint as a non-negotiable, I was like, you're going to now design life first. So what does that mean? Dinner at this time with family, or non-negotiable was jogging 3 times a week, playing music twice a week, doing this, that. And I don't care if the world ends, I'm going to do those non negotiables. I'm not going to cross any boundaries, because I need to feed the soul in order to feed everything else. So when I started designing these things, strange things happened. Clients were unhappy. Clients stopped paying and running away. New clients who were okay with these constraints started saying yes at higher prices. Signing clients who just pay me in rock and roll and be okay with no calls and no nothing, compared to what was happening before, started coming into my world. And I sort of realized you're creating this space that is now abundant and not sacrificial. And all those people on the energetic level acting from a place of scarcity and sacrifice were the ones you were attracting. Versus now that you've designed it, you are attracting people at this energetic field. And I had to accept that this was becoming the new norm.
So talk to me a little bit about the in between time. And I'm hearing you use a lot of language of this energetic field and this, I'm going to butcher some of it, this vibration, and coming from abundance rather than scarcity. There must have been an in between time where you had the agency and you're like, "Oh shit. Got to change this." The valley and then the beginnings of modern make. Talk to me about that in between time, like the things you like that were really hard. How did you work with yourself? Talk to me about that time and the process that you went through to get
Yeah.
to the beginnings of the next thing.
What sort of happened with the entry into social media? Because I was always the ghost behind successful people, but I never put myself out there. And in 2022, when I put myself on LinkedIn, I just used everything I did for other people, and that scaled.
Mm.
So my business consultancy was all like offline, getting in the car, going to places, consulting people. I was like, you can do this online now. You get paid to talk, but you're not going to get rid of this big monster here that's like a cash cow, right? You're going to add more work to you until this thing works. So I sort of took a risk averse approach to feed the mind, to feed the ego. And I said, you're going to get on LinkedIn, you're going to do this and this. And when you hit this target, if you like, you see what's going to happen. Now, fundamentally, that scaled a lot faster than I anticipated. But the hardest point was me now going, you've got 12 employees, you're going to scale to 7. These people you're going to let go have kids, have families, have responsibilities, and it's okay. There was a lot of crying, there was a lot of accepting, there was a lot of going back and apologizing and doing, but I realized what was keeping me also was a part of it. Like we became friends instead of employees. And I had to, I did whatever I could in terms of salaries and time. But when I told them, they all got jobs and I made sure to help, that helped me sort of accept the guilt, if you like, on that end, because I was letting go of somebody where I felt responsible for their family, which then led to scaling it to 4 people, to 3 people, to 1 person, and slowly downgrading that while Modern Maker, the little Twitter bro, was writing words on a screen that were making a lot more than having to pull an application just by getting paid to think. So one side of it was being okay with the downgrade. There was a lot of ego death involved in me sort of telling myself that's okay, looking at the numbers completely dry, looking at the savings account going dry, and then birthing this other seed here and having conviction that you have to put your energy in here, otherwise it's not going to work. And feeding it and giving it and nourishing it and watching it and in disbelief. And, there were sleepless nights in here. There was a lot of doubt going, this isn't going to work. I started as a copywriting course and nobody wanted to write. They were like, I don't even know what writing is. I don't even know what I'm going to offer. But
My
that
God.
gave me ideas. And I'm like, they don't want to write. They need to learn what to sell first. Go back, iterate. So this was the fun part was you're now running a second lap, and running the second lap has experience because you've already done the first lap. So
Yes.
I walked in there with a lot more conviction, but I had to work on a lot of letting go here and feeling okay with the parts of myself that sort of said, the status game, the reputation game. Those were the things that I had to let go of, because you were known as this person that X, Y, and Z. And I said, who cares? You know, who actually cares? Like, sit with that for a little bit. And I think pushing away was a strength, and working with allowing all the emotion to simmer was another gift that this venture gave me. Because if I had to cry, I would sit and cry. If I felt anxious, I would learn to visualize the feelings that I felt. Whereas before, it was like, no, no, go for a 10K run and push it away. Then you're staring at this thing in the face and going through a grief cycle. And now you're not stuffing it in a box. You let it go. And in the
Mm.
process of letting go, there was the awareness became an awakening. The awakening became continuity. Continuity became growth. And then having to accept that you are now evolved meant that this part of the journey with the modern maker started becoming more fruity. And then I got open about that experience, and I saw that a lot more people in the world resonated, and that
Yeah.
it was okay and it was normal. And finding that sense of community sort of helped me work through it, as I now teach people how to get out of that to some extent on the business side, to build businesses by design.
I'm inspired beyond because your story is parallel to mine. And I'm in the beginning stages of the seed. And so, what you said about having the ability to have that conviction and looking at your little seed going, I know I need to put my energy here
Mhm.
and this will grow is just so true. I was curious about, you're heading into your third, is it your third year with Modern Maker now? Fourth?
Yeah,
Yeah.
heard it online.
Yeah, and what a gift. I mean, for any of you guys watching, listening, Modern Maker is my favorite place to be. So, thank you for creating it. You're now looking at I know we got your to 2025 vision kind of thing. You've got a renewed vision for 2025. And I guess in addition to talking about that, could you also speak to how are you inside of you reshaping yourself or forming your perspectives, or what is informing your perspectives and your choices moving forward now?
Yeah, I think the part of me that sort of had to work to sit still and slow down was a chapter of 22, 23, sort of in a 24. But in 2024, I felt a lot more certain in a way that this is what I want. Because a lot of people who get bored don't want to be bored, and they go back to hustling and doing and being. And for me, the vision board is leading more with impact this time, and seeing a greater cause to what you do. Because obviously social media gives you leverage, and with leverage, my models where you can have a very small audience and make life-changing money. Now that I've sort of gone through that cycle, it's, can I impact a greater cause? If I teach people how to write, I can teach millions of them with digital products and leverage and this and that. Even if that means I make less, I now value my time a lot more than I value money.
Mm,
Because I also feel coming to that point of freedom, because freedom comes downstream of financial freedom to some extent. You're able to operate with a nervous system that is a lot more calm. You're able to make better decisions. You don't have to hustle for survival. You start embracing peace,
yeah.
because you build that leverage. And for me, the journey has only just begun, because the boy becomes man and man has adventure. It's like you've opened up this chapter where you have to sit still and be okay with this level of work and life and whatever that is. And that has its challenges, you know? For me, my new set of challenges is the other side of reality distortion, which is how little can I work now?
Listen, you have a baby coming. That won't last very long.
Yes.
Don't worry. All your time is about to be used up.
Yeah, but at least it's used up in a place that is warm, that is fuzzy, that is meaningful, you know?
Completely, completely, and
Uh,
you've created the space for that, which I see is so brilliant about what you've created. I don't have a full-time, I've got a part-time little stepdaughter. She comes to us on the weekends, but even the one day she's here with her cousin, I'm like, "How do mothers do this 24/7 like this? I'm constantly cleaning," you know? And it's just but it's so cool to get to be a part of her life and her world, and a lot of why I shut my business down was that I was traveling all the time, I was always away, and I started to realize that the people in my life, the ones that I kept saying were important to me, were the ones I was spending no time with.
yeah.
And so I just like big virtual high fives for what you've chosen because you consciously created the space for what's coming. I feel like I could talk to you for another 5 years. I still have a mini curiosity. Do you still have moments in your days where you get hooked up on something and you have to work with yourself?
Absolutely. I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you are the master at this.
Just
Uh, it never goes away truly,
yeah.
and you learn to live with it. The way that I articulate it is there's people that have like depression or anxiety or that sort of thing. And when they come out of that cycle, it's still present in their life. They just know how to keep it, you know, toned
Work with
down
themselves.
or
Yeah, work with them,
work with
recognize
themselves.
it, work with themselves. Yeah.
There will forever be the truck driver in me because without that, I wouldn't have gotten here. So I'm grateful. And,
Yeah.
people are multi sided, but I've now learned to accept that the hippie in me holds the steering wheel and the
Uh-huh.
truck driver's in the passenger seat or in the back seat.
Is he tied up?
But he could be. I had to tie him up for a year. But you always work with it, and even today there's moments you're like, I need to just finish this up, and no, you don't. There's always tomorrow. It's going to stay there. What's not going to stay there is the dinner table, the moments, this, that, whatever. So I mean, all of us share that, otherwise we wouldn't be as entrepreneurial as we are.
Yeah.
But having that awareness consciously to go, you sit down, you stay right there.
Stay right there. Put the timer, don't look. No.
Yeah, is is where the game is played, I think, with a smile, happily,
Yeah.
and being able to maneuver it.
And do you find so when it comes to nervous system regulation, this is a term I'm sort of using now because I recognize that the work that I do has the fruit of regulating your nervous system. To me, it sounds like your journey and the choices you made ended up regulating your nervous system rather than that was something you went after. Is that true? Tell me more, a little more about that.
We forget when it comes to the nervous system that excerpts cortisol, that you've created a new norm for yourself. So then when you're quiet for a weekend, you get bored, you're like, I need to do something. you know, Going on holiday and you need like 3 days to come back to equilibrium. The actions I took to get here showed me that normal is normal and it wasn't that elevated state of clenched bones and clenched skin and clenched everything. And whenever there are stints where that happens, it's now in reverse. You know that that's not the norm. So you consciously notice that and do what it takes to come back down.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was in reverse. And still, there are days where it's not normal. You're like, is it normal to be this bored or to have this much space or to whatever? And having to accept that, your resting heartbeat is normal.
Am I
Um,
okay? Am I al
is
if
what
I'm
is
not hopped
okay.
up on cortisol, like, am I okay? Is somebody check my pulse? Am I
Yeah.
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 So, do you have anything that if, anybody's watching this and they are where you were, anything that you would say to them?
Good question. I mean, we do lead as modern makers that we are. I think there's one takeaway is if you feel misaligned, doesn't matter what strategy, what tactic you put in place, because the answers are all within you. Your body will tell you what is out of alignment and do whatever the fuck it takes to get out of there, because no money will buy you back the time, and your body's going to thank you for that time and love you give it versus the money that you make. And I think anybody that's where I was, notice that time is the only thing that's finite that we have. And money is so infinite that you can use it to buy back the one thing that is finite.
I love it. I love it. Well, I people can find you at
On LinkedIn, Jacob Pegs. On Instagram and Twitter at MostMojo. And you can get on my newsletter at swipemymojo.com.
yeah. You're a great gift, Jacob. Thank you for this so much. And thank you for the
Thank
choices
you
you
for
made that
having
got us here.
me. No,
So
amazing. I
grateful.
really appreciate your time. I think it was a useful sort of unpacking all over. And, keep doing what you do because a lot of us need your help.
I'm on it. I'm on it. Cool. Well, we'll chat soon.
Thank you.